the 49ers have made some moves, right? So obviously the big splash, Trevarius Ward, a young corner from Kansas City Chiefs that they went out and brought in. They brought in a special team specialist in Oren Burks from Green Bay that also can double as a linebacker. Today they brought in Hassan
Ridgeway. Yeah, Hassan
Ridgeway.
Ridgeway.
Hassan Ridgeway, who just most recently played for the Eagles. And then they obviously tendered Aziz, tendered Brunskill. So those guys are coming back as well, most likely. So yeah, out of the moves that they've made so far, Rohan, how do you like them? What are your favorite moves? What are the moves that maybe you had the question mark to? How are you feeling so far about what the 49ers have done?
I'm interested in what they've done. I know, like, the funny thing was Trevarius Ward, right? He signed very late in the night on Tuesday night, and that the hour in which he signed was the 1 hour of the day that I was like off Twitter. So I come back, and then I see Trevarius Ward, and I see like, oh, a ton of like, wow, that's the player that we signed, like those type of comments, and I'm like, and then I go and do my research, right? Because I know Trevarius Ward has been a very, very underrated, solid corner in Kansas City, not for the past year, but for the past 3 years. And Trevarius Ward, when you look at it, when you look at the stats, he ranks among top 5 in almost all the metrics last season in terms of completion percentage allowed, average yards of separation. I know there was like a tight window throw percentage where he was top. I think he was first in tight window throw percentage per next gen stats. And so Trevarius Ward is the ideal guy that you want in man coverage. And the one thing that he kind of possesses, the 49ers lack, was size at cornerback. He's 6'1", around 210 pounds, 205 pounds. And the 49ers, when you look at their cornerbacks, right, you have Emmanuel Moseley, who's short. He's not as tall as you'd like for a number one type of corner. And then Ambry Thomas, he's developing. He probably can add on size, but right now he's a little smaller. He's 6 foot, about 190 pounds, still looking to add on bulk as he enters the league. Trevarius Ward fits the mold of a cornerback number one, and he got, 3 years, 40 million, 42 million. And I don't think that the contract is as bad as it looks. We obviously will have to wait because the 49ers aren't going to make it official until Garoppolo is off the roster. But the guaranteed money was only $26.7 million. It seems like it'll be a fine deal. I was a little surprised that it was a 3-year deal. I thought it could have been longer because it gives the 49ers with the potential for an out clause, but I'm fine with the 3-year deal. He's only 25 going into his age 26 season. And when you look at it, Trevarius Ward has the stats to back it up as a man coverage corner. Not only that, he fits what the 49ers want at quarter in terms of he's got a very, very solid resume as a run defender. He was one of the better run defending corners in the league. I remember I saw a stat where he was like top 10-ish in terms of missed tackle percentage amongst corners in the NFL last season. And the 49ers, they value tackling at cornerback. Last season, Diamond Lenore kind of struggled at the position. That's why he fell out of the rotation. But guys like K'Wan Williams, guys like Emmanuel Moseley, and even Ambry Thomas to an extent are fairly solid tacklers at the cornerback position. Trevarius Ward fits the mold. He's got all the traits that we want. And he also has the resume over the last 3 seasons. I think he's been a fairly solid corner for a while, in addition to the tackling kind of ability. So I like it. Is the 3-year $40 million price tag a little expensive? It is, but that's the market value for cornerbacks. Apart from J.C. Jackson, cornerbacks were getting a good amount of money. We just saw Darius Williams sign for a 3-year, $39 million deal. That's very, very similar to the deal Trevarius Ward got. I do think Ward is a better cornerback, and so I'm fine with the signing. I didn't really understand the hate, and I do think that it's definitely not as bad as we've seen, knowing how the 49ers structure contracts.
Yeah, I think that most of the hate probably came that all the rumors up until that point was Stephon Gilmore, and he's just like a much more well-recognized guy than Trevarius Ward, because I think, what Trevarius Ward does is exactly what the 49ers look for in a corner, and none of that is very flashy, right? It's like the guy who's only missed 5% of his tackles. Nobody's really looking at that when they're looking at what a corner does. But that's exactly what the 49ers need, right? Another thing that I was really excited about, Rohan, was just how few mistakes he makes as far as penalties, right? He only had 4 penalties the whole season. Yeah. Only 2 were pass interference, 2 were holding. So, that was one of the Achilles heels for the 49ers secondary, was just all of those pass interference, holding type penalties that kept the drives going for the opposing team and kept the defense on the field. So another corner that is young, right, that can play man but doesn't make those mental mistakes, I think is a great asset. And this is one thing that I think a lot of people may not may be missing with this move. I think it gives the 49ers a lot of options when it comes to how they play this group, because I believe most people think Trevarius Ward and Mosley are going to be the two starting outside backs, but then it's like, who's going to play the slot or the nickel corner? Well, because they have Ambry Thomas there, when they do go into nickel, they could bring Ambry in as with Trevarius Ward and move Mosley into the slot, which he played earlier in his career. So now you got three studs on the field that all could tackle well, that all are, very aggressive as press man guys, but also, haven't had experience at that position as well. And I think that's just amazing to be able to have three corners under the age of 26 that are all there ascending into their prime. I just really like that move a lot, Rohan.
And I agree with exactly what you just said in terms of the packages, because Ward and Mosley are expected to be the two guys on the outside in dime packages. But when you move to nickel, you have the flexibility to move Mosley in, have Thomas out there. And now you have three cornerbacks who are young, who represent your future, but also you give Thomas meaningful reps on the outside where he's much more primed to make an impact, and then also slide Mosley to the inside where he can utilize his physicality against bigger sized receivers or even tight ends at sometimes, and have a solid trio. Speaking of Trevarius Ward, I don't want to just be an optimist. The one negative Trevarius Ward kind of has is that you can see him get burned at times. But I think the good part about Trevarius Ward is his recovery speed is very good. You can see him recover on plays when he gets burnt and make a play on the ball. He won't necessarily get interceptions, but he defends passes very well. And I think that with the 49ers pass rush, Trevarius Ward won't have to rely on that recovery speed as much because they get home to the quarterback fairly often. And they get to the quarterback fairly quick, which means you don't have to hold up in coverage that much, which is where a guy like Trevarius Ward, who excels in man coverage, is useful. So that's where I think the Trevarius Ward kind of signing kind of fits the 49ers very well.
And then I also like that this may mean that they could take a flyer on a guy like Verrett, because now Verrett isn't necessarily the first guy off the bench. You don't really have to bank on him because you have, three guys that you're excited about to play the outside. You can actually bring Verrett along and kind of get him healthy for the tail end of the season and maybe even into the playoffs. And, if you could get a healthy Verrett into somehow playing meaningful ball for the 49ers when they're making that playoff push or in the playoffs, man, that could be like just amazing, because we know what Verrett can do when he's healthy. And, I just think that would be great, as well as takes a lot of pressure off of guys like Ambry Thomas and Lenore, who get another year of not having all that pressure of being the guy, which I think is going to bode well for them in the future as well. Any thoughts about Oren Burks or, what you saw in Hassan as well?
Yeah, so first in Oren Burks, I'll be honest, my initial reaction was, are we going to sign another very similar player to Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles? And the thing is, Oren Burks, what I've heard, was a special teams kind of guy. He's a special teams specialist with the ability to potentially play backup linebacker, but he didn't flash as much as at the linebacker position, and we paid him a 2-year, $5 million contract. So $2.5 million per year for a predominantly special teams player. And so I immediately thought Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, but the thing is, I like this move a little bit for the 49ers because it shows that they're willing to go after their weaknesses. And last year, they struggled on special teams. That wasn't really something that wasn't well documented. We were one of the top 6 bottom teams in special teams. I think we ranked 27th or 28th in the NFL in terms of the amount of value our special teams team provided. So I do think that this is a good move in terms of we're using our cap space wisely and we're attacking places that we have holes at. And I do think that this kind of fills part of that hole because it just makes the special teams group stronger. And the reason that I think the price was $2.5 million, we're seeing these special teams aces per se go for a good amount of money. Jakeem Grant, a guy who's predominantly a kick returner, but also has the potential to play some wide receiver. He went for $4.3 million a year on a 3-year deal yesterday to the Cleveland Browns. So that's why I think the price isn't necessarily as big of a deal. We're seeing special teams guys go for a little heavier of a price this year, which is why they probably have it. And in addition, I think it's only $2.5 million guaranteed. The 49ers do have flexibility with that contract. And then regarding Hassan Ridgeway, this is the signing that I really like because Hassan Ridgeway coming out of Philadelphia. I've heard from some people Hassan Ridgeway is definitely a guy who can be utilized very well in a 49ers type of scheme. He has movement, and the thing is, he isn't necessarily a two-down defensive tackle. We were expecting him to rotate in at nose tackle alongside our strong rotation of Kevin Givens and Ark Armstead and all those guys. But I do think that he has the potential to potentially be a fairly solid pass rusher, especially if Chris Kocurek develops him pretty well. So that's what I'm going to say with Hassan Ridgeway. I think Hassan Ridgeway definitely has the kind of like the room now to flourish because he's in a scheme that kind of focuses on these versatile guys and kind of maximizes their potential. So that's kind of what I think. What do you guys think, or what do you think about both those moves?
Yeah, so let's start with Hassan Ridgeway. So my best friend actually is a diehard Eagles fan. And so the minute I saw that this came across the wire, I texted him and I was like, what do you know about Hassan Ridgeway? And he's like, bruh, I loved him as a rotational player for our defensive line. You guys got a hell of a pickup with him. And, especially with DJ Jones leaving in free agency, this is a guy who's going to be able to come in that's played on pretty good defensive lines because the Eagles have had a pretty good defensive line. And before he was with the Eagles, he was with the Colts, which also is known for having solid defensive lines. So he comes from the cultures of these nitty-gritty type of defensive lines, which I think is going to bode well because that's exactly what the 49ers have as well. He's going to be a rotational player. I don't expect him to be able to slot in as a starter. Yeah. Some of the negatives about him, Rohan, is he has had a couple of stints on injured reserve. So he is somebody who in 2019 and 2020 both ended up on injured reserve. So health might be an issue. So I don't expect him to be somebody who's like, hype. He's going to definitely be splitting time with guys like Arden Key and Givens
he'll
and stuff
split
like
time.
That.
He'll definitely split time, but that's kind of like what the 49ers like, right? And these
Yes.
guys like Hassan Ridgeway, where they like to split time. They like to keep these guys healthy, and that's kind of how they prioritized last season, right? And you have Maurice Hurst, who's coming back from injury, who likely slots in to play a good role as well. But Hassan Ridgeway, the thing that the 49ers like, right, from these defensive tackle type of prospects or defensive line really in general, is they like guys who are athletic and who have size. Hassan Ridgeway is around 305 pounds. He's got the size, but he's also fairly athletic, and he's a fairly good athlete for his size, which is similar to the build of DJ Jones, right? DJ Jones was around 315 pounds, but moved like a freak. I'm not saying Hassan Ridgeway is that type of caliber type of guy, but he possesses the potential to utilize that to become an effective player for this team. And that's where I think it's a low risk, high reward signing. You only gave him $1 million guaranteed money on this 1 year deal. So it's definitely
I agree. I think it's a good pickup. And then with Oren Burks, just before we move on, a lot of people don't realize that Oren Burks was actually drafted 18 picks behind Fred Warner. And they have a lot of similarities, Rohan. I don't know if you know this, but they both played, Fred Warner and Oren Burks both played safety in college and then transitioned to linebacker when they went to the NFL. Obviously, Oren Burks is known more for his special teams prowess, but he is a guy who can play coverage as a linebacker and is also known for his speed. He ran a 4.59 40 in the combine. So he's just like Fred Warner in the sense that they're extremely athletically gifted. And we've seen what the 49ers have been able to do with these athletic linebackers. You saw what they were able to do with Dre Greenlaw, who was a day 2 pick, Azeez Al-Shaair, who was an undrafted free agent, and now they're getting a guy like Oren Burks, who we do feel is going to predominantly play on special teams. But just imagine if they could get anything out of him with his athletic prowess to be a guy that could jump in like we saw Azeez Al-Shaair do this year. Now, maybe not this year, but maybe in 2 years. Now you're looking at making another one of these guys who could either play an impactful role for the team or be traded for assets like I expect maybe now Dre Greenlaw is going to be traded this offseason because of them bringing in a guy like Burks. So something to keep their eye on, I guess.
Yeah, and one thing also on Oren Burks, right? This team not only develops defensive line prospects well, but we've developed linebackers well, right? We got 3 solid linebackers. Dre Greenlaw was a 5th-round pick. Warner was a 3rd-round pick, and Azeez Al-Shaair was an undrafted free agent that we've now developed into 3 startable linebackers on this team. And the thing is, D'Amico Ryans our defensive coordinator. He was previously the linebacker coach. We still have him for a season. So it'll be interesting to see how he utilizes a guy like Oren Burks and his athletic ability. But yeah, good points that you made.